Okay, this is Yaxter754, and I have made my decision to start playing Heretic, Shadow of the Serpent Riders. And for those who don't know, Heretic is one of those Doom engine games that it takes place in a little bit of a different age than Doom does, because it takes place in a little bit of a more medieval times, and it has a completely different setting than Doom has. Instead of having this kind of a futuristic setting, but this time, Heretic takes place somewhere in medieval times, so you got wizards, magic, dark magic and stuff like that, all the fantasy stuff. And we got new enemies, new weapons, and the game itself is, well, you could kind of say that it's a little bit more advanced than Doom to a certain extent, because you can fly in this game, you can use items in this game, so there are some new features that weren't present in the original Doom. But of course, Heretic is one of those games that, in my opinion, I haven't actually played this in a very long time. And it is just one of those games that is very, very underrated. And I haven't played this in a while myself, and I feel that it's one of those games that it's like good old wine, for example. It's like when you just taste it, it tastes good as ever. But it's like you rarely play it, but when you do, you're enjoying it. And last time I played Heretic, quite frankly, it must have been like several years, maybe like even like 5 years ago or something. And only then I played it very briefly. But of course, as said, the story in Heretic is somewhat comparable to Doom, so you got this one lone protagonist named Corvus, that he's, people are completely being oppressed and ultimately destroyed by the Serpent Riders, and the Serpent Riders, one of those Serpent Riders is actually the boss of this game. But the Serpent Riders basically declare, Corvus's people as heretics and they must die. So, but Heretic's history is basically somewhat comparable to Doom, because the server version included only a single episode, and these two, episodes 2 and 3, were added as part of the registered version of the game. But then when we got the Shadow of the Serpent Riders version, the last two episodes were also added. So it has a little bit of a similar arc that Doom has. So for example, let's think about Doom, for example. The first registered version of Doom had only 3 episodes, and it was exactly the same story with Heretic. But so you could kind of say that this is, quote, the ultimate Heretic, quote. So that it works out pretty much the same way, and it was put together the same way as the ultimate Doom in time. But while Heretic might have not been such a commercial success as Doom was, it still has, people are still making levels for that, and I personally started my Doom engine mapping with this game and stuff. So, but perhaps what ultimately was Heretic's, kind of a, well, not, I wouldn't really say it a demise, but what was probably preventing it from gaining larger ground was simply because it was kind of like, probably depicted as somewhat of a, yet another Doom clone. And of course, by the time that, Shadow of the Serpent Riders came out, the final version, of course we got like players like Quake in town, so it's kind of hard to, gain some ground if you're like, quote, yesterday's news, quote, to a certain extent. But Heretic, in general, it plays out pretty much the same way as Doom does, but there are some interesting gameplay features in this. But as usual, we are going to be playing through this game, and I'm going to be doing this 100%. So it means that I'm going to get all the secrets, all the kills, and stuff. There are going to be some really hard levels in this game, really, really hard, particularly in some of the later episodes. Some of the maps are going to be really hard. But I don't care how long it takes for me to beat the hardest levels, but obviously we're going to be starting out from episode 1, and then we're going to play through the whole game and, stuff. And I do my best to show all the secrets and stuff. So, but yeah, let's get started from E1M1, which would be the docks. So this is, I think it would be safe to assume that this would probably take place in what's left of the, hometown and home city of our main protagonist and the running joke of my Let's Plays, my mouse cable. And yeah, these dudes are called Gargoyles, and they are the most basic enemies of the game. They are the most weakest, but there are a few variants of these, and actually it appears to most of Heretic's enemies anyways, so that there are like few variants of different enemy types, but these Gargoyles, they mostly do, the stuff that they charge at you and scratch at you at close range, but some of the other variants shoot fireballs and are very tough, or at least physically take a lot more damage. And since this is taking place in a different timeline than Doom is, obviously we got like some medieval stuff, magic and, stuff like that, magic wands, all the medieval stuff, and these guys are called Golem. And same applies to these guys. There are plenty of variants of these guys, but not necessarily in most of the early levels. So these guys basically just charge at you, and they try to hit at you at close range, but they can be dangerous in numbers. And since this is a Doom engine game, some of the mechanics can be really seen, or the similarities, because obviously the games use the same engine. And speaking of similarities, this is basically the chainsaw of Heretic. These are gauntlets of the Necromancer. So basically, these work pretty much the same way as the chainsaw does. But it looks a little bit different, but the mechanic is pretty much the same. But there are some cool features in this game, and I will probably try to do my best to introduce at least some of them in this map. Because we will be getting some inventory items in this game as well. Pretty much, I would say, for those who play Duke Nukem 3D, probably know that inventory items are a standard feature in that game. But they also appear in Heretic. And when we use that switch, we can actually go over here. But first, I am going to be dealing with these Gargoyles. And for those who wonder, I'm using GZDoom to play this. And the reason I chose GZDoom is because it looks pretty, and of course, while it is not as accurate as the original Heretic is, or one of those ports that you would probably, use when you play, let's say, more like vanilla adaptations and stuff, but the reason I chose this was that I wanted to have a little bit more of a different experience. While it looks pretty and stuff, but speaking of inventory items, this is called Tome of Power. This book that you can actually see in the right corner of my screen, down the bottom right corner of my screen. So this is one of those items that you can use. Tome of Power is basically, it enhances your, weapons. So for example, if you have a Tome of Power activated, it will last only a certain limited amount of time. So I'm going to be taking this secret teleporter over here. I'm going to be using my Tome of Power to demonstrate how it works. So as you can see, we can already see that this weapon is like completely different. And these guys are, by the way, undead warriors, and they throw ethereal axes at you. And ethereal arrows are for Ethereal Crossbow, and that's a bag of holding, by the way, which serves as a similar purpose to what we might remember from Doom. So basically it is a medieval backpack, and that's the last secret of this map. And with that, I think it is safe to say that we are almost done with this map, and this weapon is one of the most important weapons in this game. This is called Ethereal Crossbow, and so it obviously shoots ethereal arrows. And as you can see, it has a little bit more of a wider attack range, so it is kind of like a medieval shotgun. And these guys, undead warriors, they throw ethereal axes at you. And some of these dudes actually throw red axes at you, and those do actually have plenty of damage. And apparently there is a monster out there somewhere. Oh wait, actually he is inside the exit room, of course. And in Heretic, the exit is somewhat different, but it is clearly a recognizable symbol, and this little bit of a trident symbol is associated with the exit. But I'm gonna do the one last final hoarding before leaving this map. And basically that Tome of Power was probably the only inventory item. Let's see if we still have some wand crystals around here. So I was over here and I went through these multiple secret areas. But I think this map it doesn't really have anything else to offer anymore. So I think we might as well leave. But this is how we get Heretic underway. Yes. And in this game, we don't get the percentage kind of, stats presenting that we have in Doom. This time we have raw numbers, or at least it's a little bit more different from Doom, and a little bit more easier to understand as well. But the docks, fairly generous opening map, nothing like awfully difficult, even on the hardest skill level. So, well, actually this is not the hardest skill level, but it should be considered as ultra-violence. Or actually this, I think it's called, let me see, it's called Du are a Smite-Meister. I just can't say that with a straight face. Let it just be Smite-Meister, or ultra-violence, or whatever. But it's basically the same as ultra-violence. So, but anyways, the docks is a little bit different from like Doom's E1M1. While it is a larger map, but it doesn't really have like an awful lot of difficult encounters. And of course in Heretic, what is probably the most notable difference compared to Doom, you don't really have hit scanner enemies like shotgun guys, zombie men, chain gunners, you name it. We don't have any of that. Most of the enemies actually shoot projectiles at you that can be clearly seen, and there's usually plenty of time to kind of like, strafe out of harm's way, and so there are lots of these things. So it's like, in that sense, Heretic is a very different game from Doom. And also there are lots of enemies in this game that just, charge at you, basically. But there are plenty of different enemies introduced in this game, some of them very memorable and some of them really unique, somewhat intimidating perhaps. But the docks, fairly easy map, nothing like terribly difficult, but it kind of shows you the basics of this game. So you get a bag of holding, you get Ethereal Crossbow and a Tome of Power. But in hindsight, of course, I could have just, saved that Tome of Power for the next map. But usually, let's say that if you carry items in this game, let's say that you have like 2, for example, Tome of Power, after you finish a level, you can still keep one tome of Power at the beginning of the next level. So it means that if you have like 10 of item X, your item numbers will be reset back to 1 always when you start out the next map. But with that, I think we're all done. So the docks, fairly gimmicky map, fairly easy, nothing like terribly difficult, and it will get us underway when dealing with the Sparrow, the Serpent Rider, and his minions and stuff. So this long Let's Play is underway, but I will also continue to upload Duke Nukem 64 as well, so these two are probably the main thing that I'm trying to focus on right now. Maybe Duke Nukem 64 a little bit more important, but you know, with that we're all done with the first map of Heretic, so I hope you have enjoyed this. So yeah, thanks for watching and see you around.